Well, good morning, good afternoon if you're on Eastern time, and we're going to take a look at these. We've done some things similar in the past with some pipe connection settings and stuff on webinars, but this particular issue gets mentioned quite often about the lap joints of the stub ends. So we're going to first take a look at what we're going to an overview of what we're doing today. We're going to add some components to the spec so that we can do a lap joint and stub in, and we'll talk briefly about the gaskets and bolt sets that are related. And then we're going to look at two different options we have for fixing the issue. We'll show you the issue first also after we add those components, and then we'll look at two different methods that we can use to fix the issue. The first being the most common method if you ever search around the internet, which is going to the piping connection settings, which is what I've done in the other webinar that I focused on, and how you can fix it through the simple joints and the compound joints, which is what's used for the auto flanging. And then I'm going to look at my preferred method, which is just making a custom lap joint flange and taking a look at those end types facings when you're doing that. They're two different methods. They both are valid methods. I just have personal preference of the way I will do it, which I'll explain because I'll give you some downsides of each method. And we're ready to get started here. So let me switch over from this PowerPoint over to Plant 3D. So I'm in Plant 3D. I'm in a project called Treadstone 1, which is the normal Treadstone project I use all the time. I named it 1 because what I did to save some time when covering the pipe connection settings so I don't have to go back and reset everything, I made an exact duplicate of the project called Treadstone 2 so that I can just switch projects and not have to go through all that backing out what I do in the first section. So I have the two projects, they start out, they're identical, and that way make it a little bit faster. We won't spend so much time having to back stuff out. So first, I have taken the out-of-the-box spec. I'm using the out-of-the-box spec of CS150, and I have redacted out a bunch of items to where I don't have that much in it. It's all out of the box, but one thing, and the fact that I took a bunch of stuff out, and I mainly did that to where everything would fit on one screen here of my tool palette, because I'm just going to be using one gate valve, and so I could have technically took every bit of this out of the spec and just got it down to pipe, flange, and valve, but I kept some things in there. I don't know why. But anyways, I also changed it from a weld neck flange to a slip-on flange, but this is an out-of-the-box slip-on flange. It just wasn't in the out-of-the-box spec. So I took the weld neck out, put the slip-on in, and that was mainly so on my screen it's easier to tell when it's a slip-on flange and when it's a lap joint flange versus a lap joint and a weld neck, because I didn't want it to be difficult to tell the difference. So that's the only reason I did that. But it is all out of the box. I have the exact same spec and setup in both Treadstone 1 and Treadstone 2. So that's the first thing I did, was redact that spec down and change the weld necks to slip-on. So first, to show you the issue, I've got to get a lap joint flange in there. So what we'll do is we'll come to our spec here, the CS150. We're going to right click. Now, notice this piece of pipe, by the way, is an 8-inch piece of pipe. I'm only showing you that because when I set up part priority later, I'm only going to do the 8-inch just to save some time, since that's the only one there being used. So I'm going to edit this CS150 spec in the spec editor. And what I'm going to do is come over here first and make sure I'm in the pipes and fittings, ASME pipes and fittings catalog. That's the one out of the box. I'm going to set the part category to flanges, and I'm only going to do 3" to 24". I removed everything out of the spec that was smaller than 3". Just again, that was to make the spec a little bit easier to look at. And I'll set the short description here to a flange lap joint. So there's not that many here out of the box. I'm going to take this 150 pressure class because that is the pressure class of this spec. And so I'm going to take that one and just add it to the spec. So now I've got the lap joint and the slip-on flange in my spec. I'm going to go ahead and set the part use priority of the 8" one to where the lap joint is the priority. That's the only one I'm going to worry about. It's marked as resolved, so we'll hit OK, and we're done there. Now, when you're doing a lap joint, you've got the stub end. If you're here, I'm assuming you already know how these work, so we'll come over here. The stub end itself is a fastener. It's still going to be 3" to 24". But for the short description, I'm going to use a stub end for lap flange. Right here, this one right here covers everything from 3 to 24. So that's the basically a standard one, I guess. That's right there, the long pattern. I'm going to add that to the spec, and that's going to be the one I use. So again, all out of the box. There's my stub end, which is a different type of fastener. You also have your bolt set and your gasket. I'm going to just be using the out-of-the-box bolt set and gasket that was there out of the box. You'll see the issue later, and I'm not even going to bother changing those to a flat face because that's the whole issue. If you notice here, the stub end is flat face, the slip-on is raised face. I don't want to have to sit here and put flat face gaskets in there and flat face bolt sets. I don't think it's necessary because, as you know, a stub, when you have the flange or the stub end, the stub actually changes that flange to actually use a raised face gasket. So I actually need a raised face gasket and a raised face bolt set. The issue is that the flange itself is flat face. We'll go ahead and save that. Let me see. I can't think of any reason to keep this open, so I'm going to just close the spec editor. Now, because normally if I wouldn't have changed that priority, I could literally just toggle the spec. But since I changed the priority, I'm going to toggle the project so that it gets that. I'm going to just go to the sample project and back again to Treadstone 1, and we'll reopen this drawing. And by toggling the project, that reset the priority for that flange. So now you can see I've got the lap joint flange. When I put in an 8" valve in here, I'm wanting it to use the default of the lap joint flange. But as you see, when I place it, it continues to use a slip-on flange. That's because this valve is raised face. And so when it's looking at that valve and putting it in, it says, well, I need a raised face flange. So it automatically puts the slip-on flange, even though I told it that one was the priority. Furthermore, if I come over here and change this from the slip-on to the lap joint, I get this error message. Now, this error message is telling me that in those pipe connection settings, for some reason, that's hard for me to say today. It's finding a mismatch in the properties. It could be the nominal diameter. It could be the pressure class. It could be the facing. Well, we know it's not nominal diameter because I have an 8" flange and an 8" valve. We know it's not the pressure class because I put it in a 150-pound pressure class. That only leaves the facing to deal with, which is the issue because it's a flat face and this is a raised face. So therein lies the problem. It caused a problem with the auto flanging. It caused it to put the slip on instead. It caused another problem with the valve itself because it's saying, hey, I can't connect a flat face flange up to a raised face flange. That's against the rules. So I have the leak, and I have no gasket and bolt set. I'm going to undo it back to the slip-on so I can show you two methods for fixing it. The first one being with the pipe's connection settings. As I said before, that's the most common method people use. And the second method is through a custom part in the catalog or a custom change in the catalog, however you want to look at it. But we'll start with the pipe connection method. I'm going to go to the project setup. And over here to Plant 3D, piping connection settings. So in the webcast connections that really class up a joint, which was a year or two ago, I covered this particular dialog box in the project setup in detail for everything in here. We're not going to have to cover it in as much detail, but everything we did here, I believe, was mentioned in that particular webcast. We just didn't cover it specifically for lap joint flanges, and therein lies the confusion of why people wanted more information about this particular one. So we're going to start here with the simple joints. It's a flange joint. That's where we're going to start out here. So we're going to modify it. I've kind of went through the internet looking to see how other people were doing it. That's why I said this seems to be the most common method, is through the pipe connection settings. Actually, it's the second method. I didn't find anybody else doing that except for me. So this is the one that everybody seems to be doing. I found 3 different methods that seem to be common for how to do this. It's all about the facing. Many people said all you have to do is come in here, unselect that box right there for the facing, and you're done. Modify, okay. Not necessarily true, because when you do that and you change, you get this dialog box. There is a mismatch. It now recognizes that one is flat face, one is raised face. Either do I not want to connect it, or I want to connect it. I'm going to say connect it. It worked. There's no leak. There's gasket and bolt set. Everything's fine. The problem with this method is that you're going to get that dialog box of the mismatch every time. It also still won't work on the auto flange, but that's for later. I'm going to undo it back to the slip-ons. So personally, that method I've found to not be a good idea, because I don't want that dialog box constantly. So to fix that was the second method I've seen, which is just go to facing and delete it. Go ahead and modify, hit OK. That actually worked. No dialog message, everything changed. It actually worked. Does that help me on the auto flanging? But it worked on this particular one here without the message. The downside to that particular method, in my opinion, any flange will connect, no matter what the facing is. So it doesn't matter if it's an RTJ, doesn't matter if it's a raised face, a wafer, lap joint to a flat face, to anything. Any flange facing will connect at this point, which in my opinion is not a good thing. So I don't particularly like that method. Although if all you're doing is connecting lap joints to raised face, it's easy. Just go delete that out and you're done. Excuse me. So that's not a bad option if that's all you're ever going to be doing. If you also are using flat face flanges or RTJ flanges, not a good method in my opinion. So I'm going to come back in here. Second method, the third method, which is the most common method I saw people doing, including Autodesk. This was what they had in their help files. Is to come in here. I'm going to add that facing back property back in using the add property facing. All right, so it's back in, and that's to come in here and select matching values. And this is what I actually did in the other webinar about connections that really class up a joint. I did this method in that one when I was doing something in that particular webinar. I don't remember exactly what it was, to show you that you can do this. So here I'm saying raised face, comma, flat face. And what we're doing there is we're telling you it is okay to connect a raised face to a flat face. Hit modify, hit OK. Same thing as we did by deleting it. The one difference here is at least I am making sure RTJ doesn't connect up to a flat face or a raised face. So I'm not allowing that. The problem is, again, any flat face flange will connect to a raised face flange. Again, if all you're doing is lap joints to raised face flanges, you're okay. That would work perfectly fine. But if you're using RTJ or any other type of facing, you're going to have issues. Now, that can be fixed by going to the default connectors config file. Every project has one. Right there's the one for this one. It's an XML file. I could actually go in there and set up some settings to where it does this or that. And then I could fix it to where we wouldn't have the issue with the RTJ flanges not connecting properly. My personal opinion is that I'm not going to show how to do that because that means getting into that XML file and really dissecting some stuff in there to make it work. And my personal opinion is it's not the best method still, because you're basically putting a Band-Aid on the issue and not fixing the issue. So that's why I don't like that method. Plus, I'm going to have to make sure that's been changed in every project, that I'm going to be using lap joints, which will copy over if I'm copying project settings and stuff. So it's not that critical, and I could transfer it, but it is something that's easy to forget because it's kind of complicated. And I want a fail-proof method that works every time, all the time, no matter what. So that's my personal opinion, but they do all work. And if you want to know how to do the default connectors config XML, I'm sure you can find that online, or you can contact us and maybe we'll do another webinar someday on that one. I don't particularly think it's necessary, but that's up to you. Now, I want to fix the compound joint issue to where when I place it, that's just another setting in here. Still in the pipe connection settings. If I come down here to auto flange, hit modify, right here where the flange connection of the component is, simply turn off the facing. This is not much different than what we did before of deleting the facing and all that, but you just turn that off, and that will allow, based on this setting up here, for the auto flange. So the flange will be protected here with that raised face, flat face thing we did, but here it's just not going to take that into consideration. At that point, by turning that off, when we put a gate valve here, it puts in the lap joint because that was the priority. So it actually put in the lap joint with the stub in, and I'm good to go. Again, that doesn't help me much with I really don't like deactivating the facing because I want the facing to check and shake hands correctly myself. Again, I could go into that default connector config XML, and I could make some more and/or statements in there to get that to work without having to turn off the facing if I wanted to. But again, it's almost like a little bit of programming knowledge there. So personally, in my opinion, neither of those are good ideas. They are the most common. You'll find them all over the internet, and I just don't think they're great ideas myself. But we'll go ahead and change. I'll close this out, and we're going to change projects over here to Treadstone 2, which I said was an identical project. And it is, same exact thing, same drawing. You notice I'm back down to not having lap joint flanges, exactly like we were at the beginning. So here's the method I personally prefer, and that's doing a custom lap joint flange and just making one minor change. So for this, we're going to go back to the pipe spec. And this time, instead of changing directly in here and adding the lap joint, I'm going to come over here to the catalog editor up here. And I'm in the valves catalog, so I'm going to change that to the pipe and fittings catalog. And we'll come over here and we're going to look for flanges, lap joint right there. So there's that 150-pound one that I've used earlier. So I'm going to select that one. And if you've ever taken a class from me or know anything from other webinars, I am not a proponent of making changes in the out-of-the-box catalog, especially something like this, because I want this to be used over and over again without me having to worry about new versions, new catalogs, things like this. So my belief is I want this flange in my personal custom catalog. So I'm simply going to select it and right click and say copy to my clipboard. Then I'll come over here and I'm going to open my catalog. Just go find wherever I've got my catalog and say open. So now I'm looking at my custom catalog. Some of these you may know from other webinars. Some of this is from training classes. Some of this, who knows. But right now I'm going to right click and paste, and that pasted, let's make this on part category flanges. So now there's that lap joint flange that I just copied from the out of the box catalog and literally pasted it in here, and now I have it in my custom catalog. So here's the issue. The facing is flat face. While that is true for the lap joint flange itself, like we said earlier, once you put the stub end in there, it's really a raised face connection. So here's all I do. I just literally, this is unchecked because that port is a completely different, doesn't have a facing, so I don't want to change. So I just want port 1. I literally just change that to raised face. So now it will connect to another raised face flange. It knows to use a gasket and bolt set that's raised face. Everything is going to act like a raised face flange. But my bill of material, I'm going to leave saying flat face. I don't want to change that. It really is a flat face flange. So I am going to let my bill of materials still remain saying flat face. I'm going to let my long description size still say flat face. So no matter which method I'm using for my bill of materials, they're all going to say flat face. The only difference is the facing right here is going to say raised face, and that serves no other purpose than connection. Outside of that, it's not showing up in a bill of material. It's not showing up in, it'll be in the data manager. Anyways, in this catalog, I copied and pasted. I changed the facing to raised face, but I'm not changing it in the description of the family or the size. I'm leaving that flat face because it is a flat face flange. I'm only changing this because this only has to do with connection. Nothing else. Has no effect on my bill of materials or anything else, just connection. So I save that, make that one minor change to raised face, and hit save to catalog. And then over here in the spec editor, I just need to make sure I'm on the right catalog. Come over here, and I didn't change the right catalog to that catalog. And then I added this to my spec, same way I would anything else. I'm going to go ahead and set the priority of the 8-inch, so that part's done also, like we did in the other one. The last thing I need is the stub, because I'm just going to use the out-of-the-box stub because I don't need to change it to anything else. That's a fastener, 3-inch to 24-inch. Oops, I picked 2.5. 3-inch to 24-inch. And it's going to be stub in for lap joint, the exact same one I did earlier. I'm not making a single change of that. The only change was to the flange. And again, I did that in the connection part, not in the description part. I'll save this. We'll go ahead and close the spec editor. Just like before, I have to toggle projects since I changed the priority. So we'll go ahead and toggle back and forth in the two projects, open our drawing back up. This time, as soon as I place that gate valve, since it was an 8-inch, lap joints in there. Didn't have to do anything to the pipe connection settings. Don't have to worry about raised face and flat face not connecting correctly. It literally fixed this one to where it acts like a raised face flange, which in this situation it is, even though it literally is a flat face. And yet it kept the flat face information in the family and the description size. So everything worked. It literally was just this one setting right here that was causing the issue. You fix that, you're done. I put it in my custom catalog because I'll get when I get the next version, it will have the lap joints in there. They're going to be set to flat face. So I'm always going to use the one in my custom catalog, which is just an identical copy of it, just set to a raised face. That's my personal opinion of how to use it, because it fixes it instantly without any other settings, and it's fixed in every project that I place it in. So I don't have to worry about any project settings. That's just fixes it all the time. Couple of things for side notes, just because I've been asked this by other people in the past. Doesn't matter. AutoCAD will not allow you to place a stub end to stub end. In other words, if I put that there, it won't let me connect stub end of a lap joint to a lap joint or stub end to stub end. That's just an issue that's been there for years, and it's still not going to be working on that. The closest you can get to that would be to go to this pipe connection settings, and you can set the minimum length for a pipe segment. The smallest you can go, I believe, is a 1/4 inch. Let's see. Yeah, 0.25. So you'd have to set it for at least a 1/4 inch. And with that, you could stretch this piece of pipe down as small as possible. So you end up with a 1/4 inch piece of pipe in there. And that's as close as you're going to get. I can't get that piece of pipe to select. It's so small. There we go. You'll end up with a 1/4 inch piece of pipe. That's as close as you're going to get to stub end, because if you delete the pipe, the stubs go away. So that's still something that you may want to go onto the wish list and make comments on. And just like any other flange, it's not going to work with a auto-flanging on fixed pipe, because that doesn't work on any type of flange in AutoCAD at this time. Something that I wish they would fix myself. But the closest you'll get there is to basically, draw a piece of 20-foot pipe. Say it was 20-foot fixed length, and you could draw a piece of 20-foot pipe, put a lap joint flange on it, draw another 20-foot piece of pipe, lap joint flange, and on and on. So you'd have to physically draw it. But that's the same way we do any piece of pipe that was going to have flanges like that, unless you use those pipes in the catalog that have flanges built onto them, but then your bill of materials won't show the flanges. So if you want the bill of materials to show the flange when you're doing 20-foot fixed pipe, you just have to draw it 20 foot at a time. Nothing I could do about that. That's still an issue, even with lap joint flanges, just like any other. So that's pretty much all we have today on this. Let's go ahead and first let me look and see if there are any questions.